Hi, everybody. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List. Welcome to our program. And today we continue with another interview in our series sponsored by the Bridge Alliance, which we call Repairing America's Broken Democracy. And most of us agree it needs a little bit of work. And so therefore, toward that end, we're really thrilled to have our guest today, Lindsay Bressman. Lindsay is the executive director of an organization called Civic Spirit, and a great name. Lindsay, welcome to our program, and tell us a little bit about yourself and about Civic Spirit.
Well, myself is far less interesting. I think the only thing that's of relevance in sort of describing the organization is that I actually come from the perspective, I was a social worker and I was a public health researcher. I worked in public health for many years in healthcare. So I bring that framework to this issue. Essentially, along your lines, we are experiencing a civic health crisis. So I sort of use the mentality of a public health advocate in exploring this issue. So I'll start with, where the organization was founded. It was really an initiative, much like many others. 2016 was, a bit of a moment and an aha moment for a lot of people. For us, it really illuminated two key realities. One was America is deeply divided. Nobody swept the election. It was a very tight election. Once again, we saw in 2020, so not much has changed. We are deeply divided as a nation. I will say that is nothing new, and we'll talk a little bit about the relevance of looking to history and understanding our democracy. The idea of two sides or multiple sides sort of at odds is as old as we are. It's probably as old as mankind. And the other was, okay, well, if we've got this rift, how are we going to fix it? We need to come up with something. At the time, there was a lot of beginning conversation, which was an old conversation, probably from about 10 years, that we have neglected civic education. You may, David, grew up taking civics. I don't know if you took civics in high school.
I did, indeed.
Sure. I did not. So my generation did not get it. There's a lot of reasons.
Maybe you're just making me sound a bit older now, but that's okay. Continue.
Slightly. You were like 2 years ahead of me in school, right?
Okay, there you go. We'll go with that.
There's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into it at length. Basically, we reframed our focus on math and literacy. And civics got abandoned. The problem there is that public schools and schooling was created for civic education. The idea was you can't have a self-governing democracy unless the people are informed. And then if you forget to inform them, then you're left with a broken democracy. So what does informed mean? That is a lot up for debate. But starting about 10 years ago, and then the fever pitch, the last few years is, okay, enough is enough. We have to prioritize civic education. It seems to be a possible way to address the fact that we are in this rift and that we don't know how to deal with it. A lot of that is, well, what is self-governance? When this crazy idea that people could run government, which was extremely ambitious, what did that actually mean? What was government? We always forget government is actually just people. There's nothing else there other than people in this country. So what was the original plan? What did we want this centralized body to do? How has that changed over time? And then what are the skills to deal with the fact that there's disagreement? So I'll share a little bit more later, but we're hosting a huge symposium in March. One of the Adam Seagrave, who is a very revered educator in this field, will be looking at the drafts of the Constitution. There were many drafts. It was a work of art, really. It was a compromise that was not pretty, and people working throughout the night. So this idea of compromise or, debate, discourse, those are pieces that we've sort of abandoned. And so sort of the theory was, well, if the people in Congress can't figure it out, if the adults don't know how to play nicely, at least we can look to the students. There's potential hope in this next generation. So we're part of this civic education renaissance. And a woman by the name of Danielle Allen, who's kind of one of the godmothers of civics education, she said, this is a game of R&D. And that's very familiar for me from public health, right? So when you're trying to address an issue, it's all hands on deck. You're working on it through this way. I'm going to work on it through this way. When you're trying to stop smoking, for example, it's not just you do one policy, game over, right? You're doing education. You're doing the way that bars are running, things like that. So for us, we started with the area that we know best, which is faith communities and particularly faith-based schools. I will pause there. I don't know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I can share more about why we went into faith.
No, I'd love to hear you, keep going. I mean, the bottom line here is you're sort of singing my song. I do think that we're all involved in discussions with our friends and colleagues and associates, and I'm not 100% sure that it's that much age differentiated, but regardless, there's definitely a lack of civic knowledge, civic education, whether people had it in school or whether they didn't. And then you combine that with the fact that, running for office today is really almost a contest on, who gets to run the most 30-second commercials that ultimately say very little about anything anyway. And then you end up voting for, the most popular people, right? That's why. Again, I want to hear you speak, but that's why, we end up, this is not a political thing, but, we end up, it never was before really in our history. We've elected a father and a son as president. We almost elected, a husband and wife. And a lot of that's just because of name recognition, not necessarily because of, what they stand for and what they'd like to accomplish. So anyway, enough from me. I'd love for you to continue. And I did not realize that you started essentially with faith-based efforts. Yeah. So share for a moment or two a little bit about that and how it's done and where you're headed.
I want to say one thing about what you were just saying. I think history can be an enormous gift. I think this is a very coveted value in religious communities, which is humility. There is a feeling that we are in the most important moment. I would argue otherwise. There have been many other important moments in the life of people and America. And I think it actually can be quite reassuring to know that we've dealt with some of these challenges, maybe some bigger ones in the past. And when you look kind of in history and you learn more, you say, okay, well, this is how we got through that challenge. And I come at this with a lot of hope in that regard. And I think particularly when you look at who ran for office, it was the people, it was not lifelong politicians necessarily, but maybe a farmer or, somebody who was like you and I, and then would run for office for a little and then go back to their job.
Right.
When you have this thing where they get into office and now they're planning for the next 4 years, how they're going to run again. It's a totally different animal. So right. I agree with you. So why faith communities? There's a few reasons. One is the focus when we first sort of joined the party, and I will say the real founder of this is my very close friend, Tamara Tweel, Dr. Tamara Tweel, who's a lifelong historian and civics educator at Columbia, actually. So this was not necessarily new for her, but A lot of the focus was on legislation. So it was how do we remake civics a requirement in schools? Both, both just requiring that it's now there and the kids are going to take it, and then sort of what are they going to be taught? And all of that amazing conversation doesn't actually ever touch somebody who's at a faith-based school, because they're not obligated or even protected by legislation in any way. And just in terms of numbers, there are 55 million students in America. We talk a lot about charter schools. 2 million attend a charter school, and 4.5 and growing million students attend a faith-based school. So it's a pretty big chunk of America that was going to basically be left out of this effort. Another thing is that these schools can pivot quickly. They can pivot quickly with their curriculum, with their coursework. They're not necessarily, forced to get approval through a regents or a district. And so they can make a fast change. And so we could really look at, okay, well, teachers get trained in this. How quickly can they make that? And if you're running a pilot study, that's super helpful. A third is that there's a lot of assets. I'm biased because I belong to a faith community, but faith communities revere ancient texts. They know how to get students to read old text that is racist and sexist and terrible in a lot of ways, but still revere it and still say, well, how can I find meaning in it for my personal life? They value service. They value community. These are real civic virtues. So we thought that they could actually provide some wisdom there in how to teach civic responsibility. And fourth, and this is probably my favorite part, is that faith is a binding agent. So you and I may be practicing different faiths. We may be incredibly different in terms of our life, our politics, our economics, our culture. At the end of the day, we understand that there's that this is all a gift, that this whole thing, life is was sort of bestowed, and that can be a real powerful binding agent. So that's kind of how we slipped into that community.
Well, incredibly well put, quite articulate, and I agree. And sounds like you're moving terrifically forward. I know that civic spirit. I know you guys believe in. You're trying to build bridges.
Yeah.
And develop partnerships and so forth. Just take a moment or two and share with us a bit about that.
Sure. I was thinking a lot about that, in sort of leading up to this conversation, because it's been really, a privilege to be part of the Bridge Alliance community. I've learned a lot from them, from Jeremy and some of the other people that I've gotten to learn with. I actually think, and this, this seems almost silly, but when you bring people together to learn, and sort of engage in work together, like generate either knowledge or projects or any sort of connection where you're going to both be coming at it together, relationships naturally occur. So we tend to think of bridge building as like you and I talking, and I'm talking about who I am, and you're talking about who you are and our differences. But in a way, we have found that when you kind of come the back door of just getting us to do something together, the relationships will emerge more organically. So you and I will study, Lincoln's second inaugural together, and there's a term in Judaism called chavruta, and it comes from the Hebrew word chaver, which means friend. All Jewish learning takes place in pairs, and you take a piece of text and you sit down and you read it together. Now, you and I are going to have totally different takes on it, and through that, we're both going to see things even more clearly and deeper. And so we do a lot of getting people to just learn text together. They will come at it from totally different perspectives, but then also perhaps some similarities they won't realize. With students, we find getting them to be involved in a project together, problem solving, giving them an issue, and saying, okay, you have to consensus build. You have to, consider possible solutions, using some design thinking, even as simple as like build a tower out of paper, anything where you're you're almost getting people to get outside of themselves for a minute. I find that that's a really powerful connector. I think also someone said to me once, is your goal to find common ground or common shared values with people? And I said, no, because you will not always have shared values with somebody. It's how do you love them even when you don't share values with them? That's real hard to do.
That's a hard thing to do, is it not?
It is, but if like to me, we're all created by the same creator. So, and we're all on a journey, right? So I could be here and you could be there, and who knows how things are all going to turn out. So you kind of have to give everyone a little bit the benefit of the doubt. Now, that doesn't mean I don't get angry and upset. And, I think bridge building work requires that you have some place that you're managing your own emotions and experiences. And then when you're in the professional space, kind of finding a way to be present with others. But
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end the conversation being like, well, we both now see eye to eye. It's,
part of the great divide that we face today. We've had, well, of course, you think we are not at our worst, and in terms of history, and I very much hope you're correct in that. I'm not sure, but I hope you're correct.
Civil War is the bottom of the barrel.
Well,
we literally killed each other.
The Civil War was, I think we would all agree, pretty much the low point in American history. But I think it's part of the divide today seems to be that we have little. It seems as if we have little respect, actually, for the other person's position. That it's so different from where you are or where I am, or whatever the case may be, that, and vice versa, that it's not that they disagree, it's that they literally think it goes either way, that we don't know what we're talking about, and that there's just a lack of respect. So I think to the extent that you can kind of bring that back, and civic education and understanding and support, we will be better off.
Well, I think two things I just wanted to mention. One was, so I think I opened by saying I research was where, I cut my teeth. And as a researcher, you're really, you're just doing research, you're collecting information, and not with maybe you have a thesis or a hypothesis that you're trying to prove, but if you approach a conversation with somebody merely just to I want to make sure I'm getting the facts. I want to make sure I understand where you're coming from, and you almost put on like a sociologist hat. It's a concept we learned from Essential Partners, Questions of Understanding, where you're just merely let me make sure I understand. It a little bit reduces that need to change their mind. And I also think it'll help you understand your perspective more. And I would say that's actually a place where I've spent majority of my time personally, is realizing that all of these very strong views that I had coming up, I didn't even necessarily, hadn't spent much time researching them or, gathering evidence, or They were emotional. Now, I'm not saying I've abandoned all them, or even that I don't think emotion, I think emotion is very important, but I think there is, and this goes to your point about who do you vote for? It's you just go by a platform or something. Most people don't fully understand, how politics or policy reform works, or, so, and I include myself in that. So I think taking a step back and being well, I know I feel this way, but why? Or what's the evidence that I'm bringing to my even opinion? Before I can necessarily change your opinion. I think, again, having a little humility that I may not know everything.
And share with our audience just real quickly how someone can reach you and or Civic
Absolutely.
Spirit.
Last year launched a symposium, a 3-week symposium that was open to the public. And we had hundreds of people sign up from 27 states, which was so exciting because, I mean, geographically, we're all so different in different states. So we're going to run it again, and I'm posting it in the chat. I don't know if that's helpful to the audience. Maybe you can share it. But the theme is, you'll like this, David, can we craft a shared national narrative?
Good.
We have a lot of scholars who'll be coming in workshops that kind of look at this issue of, can we craft something shared?
Okay. And what's your website, Lindsay?
It's www.civicspirit.org, and they can contact me. And I'm Lindsay at civicspirit.org. Lindsay with an A.
Lindsay with an A. Got it. Lindsay, this has been marvelous. You're very passionate and enthusiastic and articulate about your cause.
Thank you, David.
We wish you much luck and success. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. You the same. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List. And today we've continued with another in our series on behalf of the Bridge Alliance, which we call Repairing America's Broken Democracy. And please reach out to Lindsay Bressman at Civic Spirit. We hope you do, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.